Leadership questions with Tahid Burke. Good afternoon, Mr. Burke. How you doing?
I'm great, sir. What about yourself?
I'm doing great. Mr. Burke, this afternoon I'd like to ask you a few questions. Starting off is, what does the 4th of July mean to you about as far as freedom?
Well, first of all, America got its independence, its separation from Great Britain. Once America became independent, America as a nation, as a country, was able to flourish, right? So my question to me and to everybody that live in this country, have we as an individual, we as a generation of people, have we have our independence, but do we really have our freedom? And are we flourishing as a result of being free? So what's happening is people are celebrating something that they really, really don't truly understand. And when you talk about independence as an individual, my question to myself is, have I gotten my independence? Have I gotten my independence from working for someone for the rest of my life? Have I gotten my independence, my freedom from the way I think or the way I used to think? Now that I think a little more independently, have I been able to flourish? Have I gotten my independence, my separation from people that have limited thinking and no goals, no dreams, no aspiration to do more? Have I gotten my independence from the things that have held me back when I was a kid, where I thought that I couldn't accomplish certain things? Have I gotten my independence from that? So when we look at the holidays that take place in this country, they are set up to celebrate America, but we should put holidays in perspective to celebrate our own independence. In my opinion, if you are in America today and you are running a business, you have your own business, you don't work for anybody, you are celebrating your independence because you were able to separate yourself from working a 9 to 5 job. And once you separated yourself, although it was challenging in the beginning, you were able to flourish. Now, what does freedom truly mean? Freedom is not free. I'll give you an example. When we was a kid, right, we used to catch bees. And we used to catch bees and we put these bees in a jar. And when we put them in a jar, we put holes on top of the jar so the bees can breathe. So we would keep the bees, the jar, the jar and the top on the jar for about an hour. The first hour, 30, 40 minutes, the bees will be hitting their head against this top of this jar trying to get out because now they're captive, right? They were used to being free and now they're captive and they are continuously fighting for their freedom. So once the bee realized that there was a lid on their freedom, they could only go so far. After trying for so long, they stopped trying. So what we used to do is we used to take the top off the jar and hold the jar still. And the bees, because they were used to hitting their head, hitting the ceiling for so long, they never even tried to go back out. But after a while of us keeping the lid off, one of the bees saw daylight. And when that one bee saw that daylight, he went out the jar and we let him go out the jar. And it took a long time for another one to see the daylight and go out the jar. So what's happening is they say, well, okay, people say, well, you are free, you have your freedom, you have your independence, but if you don't have your thinking right, if you're not thinking correctly, you're going to be hitting that lid for the rest of your life. And don't realize that the lid have been lifted. And I think now it's time for people to start seeing the daylight and looking at their own independence.
Okay, so Tahid, to elaborate what you said about the lid and hitting the heads, it's more about mindset and conditioning your mindset to be free, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because a person can say, well, you're free, you're free to go home from work. But are you really free? because tomorrow you got to go back. You're free to roam, the earth. You're free to do whatever you choose to do with your life. But if you don't change the way you're thinking, you're really never going to be free, because you're going to be kept in the same mentality as if you had a lid on you. And if you kept in that same mentality and you stay around people that think like they have a lid on them, you're going to be limited to how far you can go.
That was very good. That was very good right there. And one more question to follow up. When you talk about freedom, can you describe how it feels to be free of, the chains and bondages of jobs compared to being an entrepreneur and running your own business?
Yeah, when I was in the Navy, and that was my first like real job. I was enlisted in the United States Navy, and I felt that's the first time, when I was a kid, I did feel like I had a sort of a freedom. I played basketball, I traveled playing basketball, and when I went in the Navy, I felt controlled. I know this sounds a little strange, but the reason I was controlled is they had to turn the lights out a certain time. At 9 o'clock, the lights went out every night on a ship. If I went out to sea and we went to a port, like we went to Naples, Italy, or Capri, we had to be back on the ship by midnight. We had to early in the morning at 6 o'clock every morning, we had to muster, which means stand in ranks and be a president accounted for. If I wanted to take off work or take off, I had to put a request sheet in. I had to read a request for me to take off and get 4 or 5 people to sign this signature to me taking off. I felt controlled. And I said to myself, there's no way that I can go through my life being controlled like this. So at that point, at 18 years old, I made a decision that I was never going to work for nobody the rest of my life. Then I start studying the principles of being a business owner. I started studying the principles of building financial independence at 18 years old. So what happened is when I started studying those principles, I started practicing these principles while I was still in the military. I started practicing my independence while still being in the military. When I got stationed in DC, I started the process, I started the process of entrepreneurship on the shores of America. Because I started entrepreneurship when I was overseas, but I started my entrepreneur journey in the shores of America while I was still in the military. And the reason I did that is because I never wanted to taste the feeling I had in the military by somebody controlling me. So everything I did when I was 19, 20, 21 years old, 22 years old, prepared me for not working. So when it was time for me to get out of the military, I went straight into business for myself. So I never experienced what it's like to work for somebody and be controlled by somebody. And the reason I never experienced that on the shores of America, because I knew that I couldn't survive that situation, right? So some people are equipped to be able to handle getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, reporting to somewhere they don't want to be, sitting there for 8, 9 hours a day, then driving home in traffic. Some people are equipped to deal with that in their life. I wasn't mentally equipped to deal with that. My whole makeup is freedom. Not only freedom, time, but money. So everything I did starting at age 18 was freedom of time and freedom of money. So when a person don't develop the mindset of freedom, then therefore they're going to be controlled. And I know, I'm not knocking anybody to have a job. I think jobs are a great thing to have. But for a person like myself, my time is more important than money. Being able to go to my kids' basketball game, go to my kids' school, being able to uh, take off in the middle of the day if I choose to was more important to me. And I fought to be free. Now, the thing about that, Ed, is when you make a decision that you want to be free, with that decision comes controversy, comes frustration, comes disappointment, setbacks, and all other things that come with it. And some of the things that helped me get through all of that is I started part time and went through a lot of the frustration while I was part time. So I prepared myself mentally. So when I went full time in business for myself, it was not that difficult for me because I experienced a lot of those things while I was part time. Because while I was running my business, Ed, I worked my business on a part time schedule, but I ran my business as if I was full time. And everything I did, I operated in a zone of I don't have no money coming in. This is all the money I have coming in. So I had to force myself to make up the difference as if I didn't have any money. So I prepared myself mentally to go in business for myself. So does that make sense? I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that pretty much answers my question. Um, but you mentioned something again about the mindset. It seems like freedom, entrepreneurship, everything is going to that one particular topic mindset. Can you expound to our audience what mindset really is and how it feels to be free of the bondages of a enslaved mindset?
Yeah, I think mindset plays the most critical part in our entire life, and how we think, because how we think is how we usually respond, and how we respond is determines our destiny. Uh, when I was a kid, I always I always thought outside the box, and I used to get in trouble for thinking outside the box. When I was in the Navy, I got in trouble for thinking outside the box. And I think a lot of us get to that point in our life where we want to think outside the box. And the minute we think outside the box, we get our hands slapped, right? For thinking outside the box. We get our hands slapped for trying to go through the lid. Because we get our hands slapped so many times, we say, you know what? I am not going outside the box anymore because it's too uncomfortable and it disturbs too many people. So what I had to do, Ed, is I had to be concerned either about disturbing other people or being internally happy. And I chose to be internally happy, where most people choose, well, I'm disturbing too many people. I need to get back in this box. I need to be back controlled. I need to get back in a situation that don't disrupt too many things. But in order to do something special in life, you must disrupt certain situations. You must disrupt the way you're thinking right now. You must disrupt the kind of people that you're associating with. You must disrupt the things that you do that's not helping you grow. You got to start disrupting your current situation in order for you to start growing. So I started working on my mind every single day starting at age 15. Every day I start working on my thinking. I start working on, how should you live? What kind of business should you have? What kind of freedom should you have? What do you want to do for your family? What do you want to do for your community? How can you get better? And I start working on my mind. And even to this day, if I don't work on my mind for 1 week, Ed, 1 week, if I stop working on my mind will start wandering on me. And this is what happens when I don't work on my mind. This is what happens to everybody. I want everybody to listen to this really carefully. If you don't work on your mind consistently, you'll start thinking about the past, which will depress you. You will start worrying about the future, which will create anxiety, and you'll lose track of the beautifulness of the present moment. So I read a book called Super Self, and Charles Gibbons, it said, first chapter, where you is where you is, but where you're going is up to you. And he says, stop worrying about your past, stop thinking about your future, because the only happiness you have is in this present moment. And I started focusing on the present moment. I started enjoying the birds that flew by. I started enjoying the beautiful flowers that I saw. I started enjoying the waves. I started enjoying seeing people happy. And the moment that I start enjoying the present moment is when I start changing my viewpoint on life. Now, what that allowed me to do, by me focusing on the present moment, what that allowed me to do was now I'm working my business and I'm not worrying about the bills that's due. I'm not worried about how many bill collectors called me yesterday. I'm not worried about nothing else other than I'm going to give it everything I have at this particular moment, one day at a time. And if I give it everything I have at this particular moment, one day at a time, when I wake up 3 years from now, my life is going to be totally different. And that is the moment that I start having control of my life, when I start focusing on the present moment. And I make sure that I stop not working on my mind, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Mr. Burke, can you give us some closing remarks on this topic and what you think our future looks like as far as keeping our mindset and financial freedom for individuals?
Well, I think, Ed, I think creating financial independence or being independent, all it is a mindset. It's a mindset. I know it sounds simple, but the decision to change can happen immediately. The process to change is a journey, but the decision to change is immediate. The most important thing a person needs is a decision and a burning desire. When they have to make a decision, they have a burning desire, and then they have a purpose, is when everything starts moving in the direction they wanted to move in. Now, we have to prepare our mind for the adversities that life offers us. Because if we're not preparing our mind, as we get older, we see more. We see so many things that disrupt our thinking. I mean, where we had no fear, the older we get, fear evolves. I mean, fear evolves within us the older we get because we know. And once we know, we start fearing. Right? So this is where you have to manipulate and control your thinking, because you see too much as you get older. And if you're not controlling the way you think and controlling your environment, controlling your happiness, it's going to be a depressing situation for most people. Now, I know that's, again, it's easier said than done, but the alternative is two alternatives in life. We can accept the things that life offers, the beautifulness of life, and also the adversity of life, so we can be happy. Or we can fight. We can fight adversity. We can fight all the things that's going to happen to us. We can sit or look in the mirror and say, why me? Why this happened to me? This shouldn't be right. That person shouldn't do it. Why that person do this? Why that person act that way? Why that person treat me that way? We can do that. If we do that, we'll lose our life in the midst of being concerned about things we can't control. Here's my one of my statements. It is what it is, and it's going to be what it's going to be. It is what it is. It's going to be what it's going to be. That means I can't control everything. So all I'm going to do is control like what I control. Limit the negative environments and do my best to live each day in peace and happiness. Now, it's two things that we're given in life that's the most powerful and most profound things. But these two things that we're given, most people abuse them the most. But these are the most two of the most profound, most powerful, most blessed things that most human beings are given in life. That's our mind and that's our body. And I'm going to finish with this story. If when you were 18 and your parents walked up to you and said, Ed, you're 18 years old, I am going to give you any car of your choice. You select the car and we're going to have it for you tomorrow. But this car that I'm going to give you has to remain with you for the rest of your natural born life. I'm going to give you a car, any car that you choose, but this car will be the only car you have for the rest of your life. Here's the thing. How would we treat that car? Will we miss any oil changes? Will we miss any tune-ups? Will we make sure the engine is strong? Will we make sure the body of the car is strong? Will we treat it like the most cherished thing that we ever have in life? And the answer to that question is yes. Why? Because we know that the rest of our life, this car has to last. This car has to last a long time. And we're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure that this car has longevity. Now, here's the challenge. God put us in this world. God gives us one body. God gives us one mind. We abuse our body. We eat anything. We drink anything. We don't exercise. We don't make sure we go to doctors to make sure we're good. We abuse our mind by not working on our mind, not being in a positive environment, not being in an environment conducive for growth, not being in an environment that creates health mentally and physical health.
Mm-hmm.
We abuse the two most important things in life that we only given once. And these things that we're given must last the duration of our life. And depending on how we protect our mind and we protect our body will determine our longevity in life. And it also will determine our happiness. We have to start reconditioning and doing a paradigm shift of the greatness of the Creator and what He had blessed us with. Because we got to stop looking around at what everybody else has and start focusing on what God has given us. And I'm going to finish with this. The day that I stop comparing myself to another human being is the day my life completely changed. But if you compare yourself to another man, to another woman, is the day that you lose control of your life. I challenge every single person to start spending some time meditating within you about what God had blessed us with, about what God has brought us through, and about beauty of this present moment, and to make sure that we live our life in peace and happiness, and that we can spread that peace and happiness to every single person that we come in contact with.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Burt. That was
You're welcome.
powerful.
You're
That was
welcome, sir.
powerful.